Okay. So hello everyone, thanks for being here today. We are really excited to have you with us for our first panel of 2022, talking about careers in the research councils. We have three fantastic speakers with us here today, who I'll introduce in a minute, but before that, a little bit of background. So the Geochemistry Group is a special interest group of the Geological Society and the Mineralogical Society. So we're here to promote geochemistry as a discipline, but especially to support the early career geochemistry community. Having said that, if you're not a geochemist or if you're not early career, that's absolutely fine. We hope that there's something useful here for everyone. So before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. Please be respectful of each other. So attendance at our events is contingent on abiding by our code of conduct. So we'll just drop that in the chat now. Other points are please remain muted for the duration of the session unless you're asking a question. So to ask a question, you can either pop it in the chat, send it to me, or you can put your hand up and we'll get to you. So we hope we'll get a chance to get through everyone's questions today. So on to the reasoning behind starting these events. If you're doing a PhD and you realize that you don't want to stay in academia, it can be quite difficult to have an awareness of the other career options available to you when you're surrounded by other academics. So we thought we'd set this up to sort of showcase some of the different career paths that an earth sciences PhD can take you in. So far we've covered careers in instrumentation, publishing and the public sector. And you can check out some of those discussions on our website, which is just going to be dropped in the chat now. And I also remembered I was meant to be sharing a nice banner because we are really excited to announce that we're also going to be starting another ECR event, so Skills for Geochemists, ECR Skills for Geochemists. We're going to be starting this at the end of March. And that means that these career events are going to be moving to once every 2 months. So I strongly encourage you to keep an eye out for more information about the Skills for Geochemists events. You'll be able to find them on Twitter, Facebook, on our website or on our mailing list. So keep an eye out for that. Okay. And today we're here to talk about careers in the research councils. So now I get to introduce you to our brilliant speakers. With us here today, we have Dr. Rehemat Bhatia from BBSRC, Kirsty Grainger from UKRI, and Dr. Lautz from NSF. And they have a real wealth and breadth of experience that I think is going to be really valuable to us today. So Rehemat is a strategy and planning manager at the Biotechnology and Biological Sciences Research Council in the UK, or BBSRC for short. Her PhD at University College London was titled Geochemical Signals in Fossil Planktonic Foraminifera. After Rehemat finished her PhD, she moved to the University of Bristol to undertake a foraminifera geochemistry themed postdoc. While she enjoyed her postdoc, after her contract finished, Rehemat chose to work for the Natural Environment Research Council as a program manager, and she's currently on secondment at BBSRC, working as a strategy and planning manager. She also has previous experience in public engagement, primarily from volunteering at the Natural History Museum in London. In her own time, Rehemat participates in academia-linked initiatives and is part of the Paleo-Perk Steering Committee and the Earth Science Women's Network Associate Board. And she's also been involved in lots of other community events as well. So most of the speakers that we bring to you are people who have been through the decision to leave academia, but we also recognise that perspectives from people outside academia can be really valuable. So we're really happy to have Kirsty Grainger with us here today. Kirsty is head of talent and skills strategy at UKRI, so that's UK Research and Innovation. She completed her degree in ecological sciences with environmental economics at the University of Edinburgh. Following this, she worked as a careers advisor in London for a year, assisting the long-term unemployed to get back into work. After this, she moved to NERC, where she held a variety of positions over the course of 12 years, including Science Programs Officer, Planning and Performance Manager, Finance Team Project Manager, Strategic Lead for Skills, and Associate Director of Science and HR Directorates. Kirsty then took up a role as Senior Research Policy Advisor at the University of Oxford for a brief period, before moving back to the research councils, this time at the Economic and Social Research Council, ESRC, as Senior Policy Manager for Data and Skills. After being the inaugural director of the UKRI Future Leaders Fellowship Scheme, she moved into her current role as the UKRI Head of Talent and Skills Strategy in May 2021. And finally, we're really grateful to Laura for being here from the East Coast today. So she's joining us quite early, and we really appreciate it. And I'm sure that Laura's career story is going to be really interesting to lots of people here. So Laura is a program director of the National Science Foundation, or NSF, in the States. She did her PhD on stream groundwater interactions and nitrogen uptake at Syracuse University. As program director at NSF, she manages proposals and awards for a program with an annual budget of $14 million that supports research on continental water processes at all scales. In addition to this, she works on independent research addressing how hydrologic processes influence water quality and movement through watersheds. Prior to joining NSF in 2019, she was the Jesse Page Hiroy Professor and Department Chair of Earth Sciences at Syracuse University in New York, USA. As a faculty member at Syracuse, Laura advised graduate students and postdocs, taught undergraduate and graduate programs, wrote peer-reviewed publications, and led an externally funded research program. Prior to her career as a tenure-track faculty member, she taught high school and worked in public outreach in the sciences. And she lives in Northern Virginia with her husband, twin 12-year-olds, dog and a cat. So a big welcome to all of our panelists. We're really, really happy to have you with us here today. And I'm going to kick off by asking you all to please tell us a little bit more about your role, the organization that you work for, and sort of what it is actually that you do. So very much, want to get us started?
Sure. So I'm going to go over acronyms again for anyone that joined late, so that you can follow along. So currently I work as a strategy and planning manager for the Biotechnology and Biological Sciences Research Council, which I'll now abbreviate to BBSRC. So BBSRC funds bioscience research and training, covering a wide remit of really exciting science areas, from animal and human health to renewable resources to agriculture, and is one of the 9 academic and industrial funding councils which are part of UK Research and Innovation, or UKRI. So UKRI is the UK's largest public funder of research and innovation and partners with those working in academia and industry. UKRI's funding is part of an allocation which the UK government gives to the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which I'll now abbreviate to BASE. So research councils essentially have 2 sides, and I've worked on both. One which deals with allocating and spending funding, and another which helps to acquire the funding from the government. The second part is the side I currently work on, working within the strategy and planning team, which is part of BBSRC's strategy, planning, evidence and engagement department. So if you've ever submitted a research fish form for a UKRI grant that you hold, that data eventually lands with the department, just like mine. The teams in my department use that information, together with many other different types, to eventually write UKRI's grant proposal, which forms part of BASE's overall proposal to government, known as a spending review bid, so that UKRI stakeholders can do more things in the future. So to frame the bigger picture of my role, and so you can actually visualize the structure of a research council, I'm going to explain the life cycle of UK grant funding to you, comparing it to the water cycle in a really basic way. So grant funding begins its life deep in the mountains of Her Majesty's Treasury. It then flows down to UKRI via BASE. This flow process happens during a spending review. Once the allocations process has taken place and BASE has their final budget, grant money can then be distributed to stakeholders, and funding takes many routes to them via different grant calls run by program managers, just like a braided river travels to its endpoint, such as all of you in the audience who are researchers and innovators. When you spend your grant money and remember to tell loads of cool stuff, remember to tell lots of people about the cool stuff that you did, this is like the process of evaporation, and all of your outcomes eventually reach the cloud system of strategic planning, evidence and engagement teams like the one that I work in. A bid is written, that bid rains down to the Treasury, and the cycle then restarts. But a really important part of this proposal is knowing exactly what is important to individuals and teams receiving the funding, and it's therefore really important to consult with them. So the role that I have within BBSRC helps to gather some of these insights through managing engagement with the universities that BBSRC has strategic partnerships with. So BBSRC directors relate with senior management at these universities through regular engagements, and they discuss issues of importance to bioscience research. So I go along to these meetings, help to prepare all the supporting resources, capture the conversations which happen, and follow up on any actions that result. There's a few other parts of my role which support in BBSRC activities that look forward, like delivery plans, which outline future ideas and strategic areas, which a research council might want to focus on in a set period of time, similar to a plan that you might produce for a PhD thesis or a fellowship proposal. and also ones that look back, such as gathering information for reports which justify money BBSRC spends and receives, in the same way that you might have to write a blog post to a society who helped fund your attendance at a conference. With the looking forward part, stakeholder engagement and consultation is also part of this. And one particular highlight that I've had so far in my role, which has been really short so far, has been helping to organise a community webinar to gather BBSRC community's views on the structure of their new delivery plan, which will be out later this year. This was really fun and really well received too. Yeah, quick summary of where I work, what I do, and I'll pass over to the next panelist.
Thank you. Hi everyone. It's really nice to see everyone's names, if not faces. So I'm Kirsty Grainger. I'm the head of talent and skills strategy at UKRI, and Rehemat's done a really great introduction to our organisation. I suppose we actually technically work for the same organisation, so why do we say different things on our names here? So I think we're sort of an amalgamation of sort of 9 councils, and then holistically we are UKRI. And the sort of UKRI bit is the underpinning support that provides strategic direction, policy development, helping get money from government aspects to UKRI. So that's where I work in the sort of support function of the whole. As you heard from my bio, I've not been doing this job very long. It's not quite a year yet. And literally every week so far has been completely different. So I couldn't tell you a typical thing that I do, couldn't tell you typical projects that I'm working on, because they are literally changing week by week. And they have included, let's say, the 2 things I'm currently involved in. So one thing is our allocations process. So this is about how we bid for money from the government and say, actually, yeah, as a department, as BAYS, that's our parent department, you're going to get money from Treasury, we would like some of it, please. And my role is to make that argument in the talent space, early career, postgraduate training, fellowships, and say, this is how much money we want, and this is what we're going to spend it on, and bring together, collaborate with lots of colleagues internally in UKRI, and to make that argument to Treasury colleagues and to BAYS colleagues for what we want. The other thing I'm working on at the moment is something called the New Deal for Postgraduate Research. So this is looking at our students, how UKRI invest in PhDs. So we support between 20 and 30% of the entire UK population of PhDs. That's our funding, about 25, 30% of the UK's PhDs funded directly through UKRI. And we're looking currently at, do we do that in the most effective way? Is it do we give the best support to individuals? Do we give the best support to organisations that do training for PhDs? What about the partners? What about our supervisors? Holistically, do we do this in the most effective, best way? And there's consultation open at the moment, little plug, if we can put it in the chat, I will put it in the chat. And it's looking for people's views on postgraduate. So that's just 2 of the things I'm involved in, and next week it'll be something different. But I've been really lucky working here for the last close to 20 years now. I have done most jobs within the research councils, from as you heard, from infrastructure to the similar role that Rehemat had in NERC. I was also in that role in NERC a very long time ago, to being the director of the Future Leader Fellows, which was leading a team of 40 people and a budget of £1 billion to spend on fellowships. So these are all very different roles within an organisation, but it's all contributing to making sure the UK's R&D, R&I system is the most vibrant it can be. And I'll hand over to Laura.
Thanks, Kirsty. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Lautz, and I'm joining you from the East Coast, as Jess mentioned. So I work also for a federal government, but a different federal government in the US. So I'm a federal government employee, and I work at the National Science Foundation. Just to give you a little bit of background on the National Science Foundation, there are several agencies within the US federal government that fund R&D, like research and development. So you may have heard of some of these, like NASA, the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, the US Department of Agriculture. We also have, of course, the National Science Foundation. So we're one of the federal agencies that supports research in the US. We're a little bit unique from some of the other federal agencies in the US because we don't do the science internally. So, if you were working for the federal government as a research scientist in the US, you could work for the US Geological Survey, for example, doing research directly funded by the US government. The National Science Foundation, 95% of the money that we receive from the federal government goes out the door as grants to university researchers. So that's the role primarily of the National Science Foundation, is awarding grants. And those are primarily for institutions of higher education, colleges and universities, although we also do fund not-for-profits and other organizations. So I'm a program director, which means that I work on one of the many programs at the National Science Foundation. So the National Science Foundation has many directorates that cover your major disciplines like biology, engineering, the physical sciences. I'm in the geosciences, and I run a program called the Hydrologic Sciences Program. So my primary role is to work with researchers. I talk with researchers about their ideas and whether they're a fit for my program. I give them guidance on how to prepare a proposal for the National Science Foundation. And then, of course, the biggest role is receiving those proposals, finding reviewers for those proposals, convening panels of experts to review those proposals, and then using the input from the community to prioritize those proposals and make recommendations for funding. So I am like kind of the front lines between the foundation and the folks that are applying for funds from the foundation. And so that's what I really love about the job, is being that interface. Like, most of my work is talking with researchers, either who are writing proposals or curious about the status of their pending proposal, or are working on funded awards and need guidance on managing their award. And then also working with the community to find reviewers, find panelists, and really engage people in the foundation. So part of that is, of course, reviewing the proposals that are pending, but also finding early career researchers who want to learn more about the National Science Foundation and how the research enterprise works, and engaging them as reviewers and panelists, and working with them in outreach events to help them learn about the foundation and how they can access funds to support their research. Thanks.
Brilliant. Massive thank you to all of you for really detailed and in-depth explanation of what it is you do. Like I said, I think the research councils can be a little bit opaque to people not in them. So that was really, really useful. Hopefully no one can hear the massive lorry that's just parked outside my house. Okay, that's really good. So I'm going to move on. A lot of our attendees are considering what careers they might want to go into, and it can be really difficult to sort of match up the skills that you've learned in your PhD to these careers that you don't really know much about. So I'm going to ask you, what benefits can experience in academia bring to roles in your sector? So what sort of strengths can academics bring over from the world of academia to work in research councils or funding bodies? And
you want me to
jump in straight in?
Do you want me to jump in? Okay,
jump in, that's brilliant.
Okay, so I think the first thing I'd say is that I think there are some very specific skills that you learn in academia, but they're not always as specific as you think they are. And what I mean by that is, you're probably thinking, my experience tells me that a lot of people working in academia think that the skills they have are only applicable in that niche that they're working in. But actually, it's so much broader than that. And they're all really, really brilliantly transferable skills. And if you don't already know about the Researcher Development Framework, I'd really, really recommend you go and find the Researcher Development Framework. It was actually developed in partnership with VTI by the research councils quite a while ago now, but it has these sort of 4 different the domains. They're called domains. There are 4 different domains, and it's about all the skills you might have as a researcher. And if you look at those different domains, you'll, as a non-academic, I look at those domains and go, they're absolutely the skills that I'm looking for. when I'm employing someone within my teams or within this organization. So I think know your skills, don't undervalue them, and understand what they are, because I think once you know them and then you start looking at job adverts elsewhere, you'll see how transferable they are. And also, for those of you based in universities, go find your researcher development folk. They know how to do this. They know how to show you how transferable your skills are, because you're sitting on a wealth of talent and you just might not realize it. That's my pitch for the research development framework as well.
I love that. Is that through Vitae, Kirsty? Okay, I just drop a link in.
I'll put a link on. Oh, well done. You're ahead of it. Yeah.
So thanks for that, Kirsty. Rehemat, you've been through the experience of moving from an academic position into your current role. So what skills do you think sort of helps you make that transition, and are valuable ones that you use day to day, or even not day to day?
So I think one of the main ones that everyone actually has is that you understand how to talk to the stakeholders, because they're all researchers just like you. So, you know, you have that really key skill. You have, if you've led a conference, you've got, or you created one, you've got strategic planning skills behind you. If you've been on committees, that's still strategic planning and project management. You have an understanding of the peer review process. Even if you haven't published, like, you still kind of have that base of knowledge. You have great communication skills if you've done any psychom, particularly key when you start leading teams and teaching people new stuff when they come in. It's new staff, like that's a really good skill to have. So if you've done any demonstrating, that really helps with this teaching new staff and mentoring new staff aspect as well. If you've also, with the conference planning, you have events planning experience, which I know in my new role, I was like, oh my God, I can use this finally. So that's been a good thing. You know how to prioritize your own work. You can deal with conflicting deadlines if you've had surprise lab days. Very good for dealing with uncertainty in government. So it's something you can also do. Yeah, these are probably the main things I'd highlight.
Yeah, thanks. And Laura, I know you sort of have these two kind of roles at the moment, I guess. You have your like NSF role, but you're also doing your own research. So the question about like leaving academia is maybe not totally applicable, but like what skills that you use in your research role do you also find that you apply in your job?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. I think actually it often surprises people that program officers at the National Science Foundation can still run an external research program, you know. So anyway, we could talk more about that, but yeah, so there's, you know, continuing to use the maybe academic skills that were most useful in a professor position, you know, in a faculty position. But there are a few things that, you know, having experience in academia can really help with working at a foundation or working in the research enterprise as a program officer. I mean, the first is like the ability to read and quickly learn and understand. So like reading journal articles and figuring out how to read them efficiently and you know, get the big picture. You know, reading a lot of proposals, they can be quite dense. And so just the ability to kind of navigate academic writing, I think is really, really important. Also, you know, I think as PhD students, there's kind of the healthy tension between breadth of knowledge and specialization in your specific research domain. And I find as a program officer, the breadth piece is really important. So being able to not only understand, but have genuine interest and curiosity about a broad range of research topics is important. I also think if you've been an academic and then you move out of academia and you engage with academics, you also have a healthy degree of empathy. So I just find myself really empathizing with the challenges facing like an assistant professor who's seeking their first grant and trying to manage a research program and start up a new lab. You know, having experience with that just gives you a degree of empathy, and you know, you can relate to your stakeholders. I also do a lot of, I hope I do a lot of mentoring. And so, you know, experience working with graduate students or undergraduate students and kind of helping them navigate the academic field. This is also something that as a program officer you can do with the folks that are engaging with your program. And then the last thing I would say, the most important thing, is the ability to develop a network. So I mentioned that a lot of what I do is finding reviewers and finding panelists. And so, going to conferences and just talking to people and learning about what they do and giving them your card and growing that professional network, as you probably are doing as a PhD student. That's the exact skill that I need to use on a routine basis, just meeting people, learning about what they do, and trying to get their interest and enthusiasm to engage with me.
Brilliant. Thanks all for that. So moving on to audience questions, and if you have any questions for our panelists, feel free to just drop them in the chat. So one of the questions that we had come in is, how can PhD students best gear their PhD towards getting a job in your field? So from all of the things that you've said, maybe it's just do a PhD and then there's the opportunity there. But they want to know what sort of skills can they develop that will help them sort of be a good candidate. Laura, you're nodding, so I'm going to pick on you.
Oh, sure. I think that's a really good question. What kind of skills beyond maybe, I think the core skills that you often learn in a PhD program, like executing research, writing papers, all of that is important. And so, that kind of core training, I think, is really critical. But I think, when I think about people interviewing for jobs at the National Science Foundation, I'm trying to think of the things that we look for. I mean, you'll always hear that communication skills are important, but of course they really are. Being able to communicate like the big picture, being able to relate to your audience, being able to express like your own career aspirations and interests in a clear and meaningful way. Communication is really important. And yeah, I think being able to, Rehemat mentioned dealing with uncertainty. I think showing adaptability, uncertainty, curiosity, all of those parts of communication, I think, are really important for applying for jobs at the National Science Foundation, among other things.
I pick up on that. I agree with all of that, Laura. I know particularly the big picture thing sort of resonates with me. I think I can't think of a job in UKRI where you have only a teeny tiny part of a specialism that's not having to link to other disciplines or other parts of government, or it's broad. What we do is often broad. So it's about having that big picture awareness, and you won't get that through your PhD training, but you will get that through talking to others and being curious and finding out about an organization, or just having a chat with someone who's applied for a grant, or take some time to find someone who works at an organization you might be interested in working at, like you are doing now, quite. But it's sort of that big picture stuff I think is really important, because how we view the world is very different in terms of we're not just focused in on one specific thing. We're having to think all the time, how does that link to other things that we're doing in our portfolio? So we get the most out of that investment or that engagement or that interaction.
Yeah, Rehemat, do you have any more thoughts on that? How did you make yourself competitive?
I guess I would agree with everything that has been said so far. The communication thing is definitely a key one. So if you can go out and do some public engagement and just talk to different audiences, learn how to adapt your style of who you talk to and how you talk to them reactively is really good. And yeah, I think that's
as far as Rehemat's event organizing skills go, they are absolutely incredible. And I've been to several events that she's organized, and she can organize. So if that sounds like it's something she's found useful, so if getting involved with organizing things and being on panels or
They also learning, like knowing how to plate spin. So if you've got like an experiment that's got 3 different aspects to it, a big part of my job now is plate spinning, where I have to think about loads of different university engagements all at the same time, all in the same month. I've never had so many deadlines so close together. And so I think having the experience of like managing multiple different things going on in a PhD has definitely helped with that. Because you constantly have to think on different angles and like different timelines, and yeah, that's been a good thing.
Jess, I actually have a question for Rehemat and Kirsty, if you don't mind. This will follow on. I was going to say, like, if you really wanted to work at the National Science Foundation, one of the best things you could do is start reviewing grants or serving on panels, you know, and just engaging with the foundation. And so I'm wondering if it's the same where the research enterprise is so community driven, and like whether early career researchers would have that same opportunity in the UK. You know, is it the same?
Not sure it is the same. I don't know why. Rehemat, do you think? No, I don't think it is either.
I think if there's if research councils visit your universities, go along to those calls, because there's a lot in them that you can learn from. So if you have that opportunity, go.
On a sort of similar topic, but back at Laura, I was really interested trying to find panelists and someone from the NSF. There are these sort of like rotator positions. Could you expand a bit more on that? Because I don't think we have anything like that in the UK. Oh, we do. Kirsty is nodding. I think you guys should just talk, and yeah.
I'm so glad you asked that question, Jess. Yes, at the National Science Foundation, it's not totally unique to NSF in the US, but it's definitely something used a lot at NSF and maybe not as much at other agencies, this concept of a rotator. So, you know, all of these different programs that award grants, like the Hydrologic Sciences Program, you know, other programs at NSF, they're run by a few different program officers typically. And there's usually, you know, there's permanent folks at NSF. So I'm in a permanent position at NSF, and those permanent folks provide some kind of long-term continuity in program management. But then we also have a number of rotators. So in hydrologic sciences, I'm the one permanent program officer, and the other 2 program officers are rotators. And rotators come in from universities. So we have a rotator from Penn State and another from Fort Hays State University, just US universities. And they work as program officers, and they can have 1-year appointments, 2-year appointments, 3-year appointments. So they're long-term, you know, they're not just a sabbatical, they're typically multiple years. And then after people finish their rotation, they go back to their academic appointment. And so a lot of people find it just a great opportunity, like within their academic appointment. Maybe they don't want to permanently leave academia, but they want to try something different or get some different experience. Maybe they're interested in administration, or maybe they're just interested in the research enterprise, or maybe they're community minded, you know, kind of service oriented. And so they want to do that for some time. And so we're constantly, I mean, by the nature of rotators, we're always looking for rotators, right? Because people are always coming and going. And so it's a great way, you know, if you want to learn what it's like to be a program officer, like you're even considering applying for a permanent position at NSF, a lot of people start by serving as a rotator to see if they like it, and then pursue permanent employment afterwards.
Can I ask Laura, are they mainly senior academics that do that? Mid-career? No,
not always. I think they're typically tenured, but they don't have to be. But I think that it's often hard within the pre-tenure process, maybe, to take such a long break. It's not really a break, but to make such a long shift in your time pre-tenure. But we certainly have many mid-career rotators. Some of it is just the challenge of timing for people in their personal lives. So often mid-career folks maybe have young families, and it's hard to move to a new city for 2 years. But now in this more remote work environment, we actually have a lot of mid-career rotators who have young families, who I think have joined NSF as rotators because they can. in this new kind of world. It's interesting.
So in the UK, I mean, what's really interesting, different research councils as part of UKRI have tried rotator models. We've spoken to colleagues at NSF to learn what's worked well over there, and we still have some rotators, but it's not done in the same sort of formal way and long-term way. It seems to be more on ad hoc basis, but it really adds to the richness of the folk that you work with and bringing in new and different experiences. So I really like the model, actually, and we do use it, but not as frequently. But again, mid to late career normally, rather than early career.
Brilliant. I'm also quite aware, so we have you guys are representing UK and the States, but we do have people signing up from sort of all over the world. So I know that you have this, I'm putting you out on the spot here. I know that you have links with each other, so the NSF and UKRI. Can you speak at all about sort of the experiences or the opportunities that you maybe have a sense of in other countries other than the UK and the US? If you don't, that's absolutely fine, because I'm putting you right on the spot. But you know, to your knowledge, do research councils in other countries work in a sort of similar way? Are they looking for academic experience within those sort of organizations?
Closest conversations I've had with Swedish counterparts, Norwegian counterparts, and again, very similar. Netherlands, similar again. So I think that Canada, So I don't think I've come across a model that isn't similar when we've gone globally. So UKRI has offices in India, Washington, Canada, elsewhere. And again, when we talk to colleagues and counterparts, Japan, etc., it's a very, very similar model.
Okay. That's really great to hear, I'm sure, for all of our attendees. I'm going to move back to the audience questions for now. Do you have any recommendations for those who are finishing their PhD within a year and want to start putting out feelers for jobs outside academia? So I know that you've mentioned sort of, you know, if there are events at universities going along to those, but are there any other sort of to either, I don't know, make a contact, like what's the typical route into your careers? Rehemat, you've been through it recently, so I'm going to pick on you.
So I mainly knew that you could work at the research councils because at Bristol, where I did my postdoc, there was a series just like this one where people talked about careers outside of academia, and so I saw that listed, and that was the main way I knew. I definitely go and have a chat with people in research development offices, because often they have experience at the councils, and also just drop people emails. Like if you see a program manager's email listed on the website for a council, see whether they're willing to have a chat with you. Do it through LinkedIn if emails aren't your thing. Yeah, I think just branch out and network with people. There's some people that advertise they work for UKRI on social media, so this is another route we could take as well.
So anyone want to add anything to that? Or
I guess my only suggestion, I mean, it's, I am not an early career scientist, but I did recently make a career change, and, you know, it is challenging, I think, sometimes to learn about and even understand what the opportunities are. And I think in hindsight, I would have told myself to apply for more things that I was uncertain about, just because the experience of preparing an application, although time consuming and sometimes challenging, is really good professional development, whether or not that actually is successful. And I also found it was useful to interview for things. I got good advice that it's best if your first interview is actually not the interview for your dream job. Like maybe it's good to interview for a couple things that you're interested in and could be your dream job, but might not be, because then, you know, again, the professional development. So not to apply for things you aren't interested in, but hey, you know, if you have some interest, you might be surprised by the interview process. And then the other thing is, in the US, we do have some early career opportunities like we have something called the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships. These are fellowships for recent PhD graduates to work temporarily in the federal government all across all kinds of agencies. And they often provide a platform for transitioning into employment in the federal government. So, you know, I know not the audience might not be in the US, maybe some are, but maybe there are other kind of analogous things where there are opportunities for post-PhD fellowships in career sectors that might be of interest to you that you could look out for.
So if you're a UKRI PhD candidate, then we do have policy internships that you can be funded through UKRI and go and work with some of the policy organisations. And there are other opportunities that your host organisation will probably be offering as well, similar kind of policy or placement opportunities. I think I'm just drawing on my experience of being a career coach for, albeit a very short amount of time. I learned quite a lot in that period. Laura, you're absolutely spot on. Interview for as much as you can, apply for as much as you can. It's a really, really good way of understanding yourself, what you might be interested in, and understanding what's out there. And finding job sites and regularly looking at job sites is another way of doing it. And one of the things we used to recommend is, you know, once a week, well, if you're working with someone who's long-term unemployed, it's every day, but probably in this situation, it's probably once a week or once a fortnight. Spend half an hour just looking at a job site, whether it's jobs.ac.uk, charity jobs, Guardian jobs, whatever it is, and just bookmark or store in some way the jobs that are catching your eye and catching your attention. Because if you really don't know what you want to do outside of academia, then after 6 weeks of doing that or 2 months of doing that, you'll be able to go and look at what you've bookmarked without thinking about it too much and just go, there's a pattern there. Actually, there's something here that I might be interested in. And my tip is always bookmark stuff, even if you're not qualified, even if it's in the wrong location, even if it's at the wrong salary, because the bookmarking is not about it's the perfect job. It's about getting that pattern of what you might be interested in and talking to people. Yeah. I'm definitely just reach out to people and ask them.
Some really, really brilliant advice there. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so moving on with the audience questions. Someone here who has a PhD in volcanology and petrology, they're considering their options for work post-PhD. So are there any openings for those backgrounds in the research councils? Yeah, would that be something that someone would be able to apply to working in your organizations?
So yeah, I guess as long as you have an interest in the remit of the council that you apply to, this was the most important part. And often when you do the interviews, they might ask you, you know, why this council? And so use your background and use your interests. They don't even have to be formal interests. So you can definitely use that as evidence. There are also councils that will, at least within UKRI, that will not place you in a portfolio that's actually your background. So even if you're like super keen on your research interest, sometimes you might not be placed in the portfolio that you prefer, but you can always interact with the portfolio that you like anyway. So there's that balance that you can have.
And Laura, how about at the NSF? Would there be sort of space for volcanology or petrology expert in the NSF? I know that might be a bit out, I don't know how far outside of your...
No, actually, I'm in the Geosciences Directorate in the Division of Earth Sciences, which has all the kind of core earth sciences domains that you might think about. And one of those is petrology and geochemistry. So we have a petrology and geochemistry program that has a permanent program officer and a couple of rotators. And so I actually thought, I was just trying to look online if I could find, I think they were actually recently looking for a rotator, but I'm not sure if that position is still open. But by nature of rotation, which we talked about before, it wouldn't be too long before, we're always sort of keeping an eye out for petrologists and geochemists who might be interested in working as program officers.
I will just add, if I may, one of the things UKRI is quite a complex organisation, but one of the things, we actually have our own research institutes as well, our centres, institutes and units, and one of them is the British Geological Survey, and they often have openings for that kind of expertise. But that wouldn't be in sort of the funding world, it would be in the research world.
That's a really brilliant point. Thanks, Kirsty. Okay, so another one that's been sent in, there's somebody who says they're in their late 30s, they're finishing their second PhD in 2 years. I think that's incredibly brave. I don't know if I'd want to do a second one. And they're wondering if they are too old to be starting an academic career, and where are the best places to look, if so. So there's a lot of advice that could be given, but if you feel comfortable jumping on that. I'm guessing there's no age limits on starting work in the research councils. That's 3 shaking heads. That's brilliant. So.
And I would just add that if we look at demographics of grant applicants and grant holders, there's no age limit there either. So if you want to stay in academia, age should not be a barrier.
Does anyone want to expand on that a bit, or is that's it? No, that's it. There we go. Age is not a barrier. If you want to join,
age is not a barrier. I was going to say, definitely not. I think I was trying to think of some specific evidence, that I could provide. But I think even like at NSF, when we define an early career researcher for different types of awards that are out there, they're not age-based anymore. They're years post-PhD. So it's really about, whenever once you've earned your PhD, then, these different career timelines start, and we have awards and opportunities for people at all career stages that are really defined by where you are in that career progression more than your age.
And UKRI has gone even further, and we don't even do period past PhD anymore. So years past PhD is no longer a thing. It's around all the markers that indicate that you're still early career. So if I think about our Future Leader Fellowship scheme, we've had people who in their late 40s, late 50s, who just finished PhD and then were successful in getting a fellowship, and they bring a whole wealth of experience from previous lives, previous roles into their fellowship and the work that they're doing.
Okay, brilliant. If that's all on that one, we've got one more audience question, which will bring us nicely to wrapping up, I think. So what are the pros and cons of working in your field versus working in academia? So for those of you who've experienced both worlds, what do you like, what you dislike? Laura, you can compare them directly, I guess. And Kirsty, if you have any observations from your experience working with academics, feel free to share.
It's exciting going to panels. It's definitely been a highlight. This is not something that everyone can do, even if you are in academia, because it depends whether you get those invites. But that's definitely been a good highlight. One thing that I definitely wouldn't have been able to do in academia was I helped out with the COVID-19 urgency grant scheme in 2020, and that was a good feeling because it felt like I was helping the pandemic without having to leave my flat, which was nice. So that's definitely been something that's been good. And you can learn about government strategy from a viewpoint that you might not see within academia as well. Yeah, these are probably the main things.
I definitely felt like when I left my faculty position and came to NSF that I've described it to people as I felt it was such a huge risk. Like I felt like I was diving into a pool, not knowing if it was full of water or not. I just, I don't know. I thought this could be the worst decision I've ever made, but I went for it. I guess I would say the thing, and I love it. I wish I had made this decision sooner. And so the things that I really like about working in the National Science Foundation, in a government position like this is What I've really noticed is like when I go to conferences or talk to other faculty or talk to them about their research, any element of like competition or comparison that I used to always feel. I don't know if anyone can relate to that, but I don't feel anymore. You know, I don't feel like I have to sort of talk up my own research anymore, or sort of be kind of, I don't know, putting that out there in some way. I can just walk around and talk to folks of just being completely curious about what they do. And it's truly has nothing to do with me, or, you know, no, I sort of don't have to worry about that. I really love that, just being able to talk to people without any element of like comparison or competition. I also find that I can have a much bigger impact. So I used to be a department chair, and I think department chairs are perceived as having a lot of autonomy or authority, or you know, ability to implement change. But I actually find that's much more true as a program officer. I have a lot of autonomy, and I have the ability to like make decisions independently, or at least make very well-received recommendations, and have an impact, you know, be able to really like change someone's career trajectory by recognizing the merit of the work that they propose and investing in them. And I just find that incredibly rewarding. So those are the things: the impact, and the kind of being able to focus on others instead of worrying so much about my own research program.
Brilliant. Kirsty, if you don't, that's okay if you don't have anything. No, that's fine. Okay, so that's the end of the audience questions. If I don't think nothing else has been sent in. So I'm going to say a really, really big thank you to all of our panelists. It's been a really great discussion, and really great to all the different perspectives and thoughts on careers in the research councils. We're really grateful for having you along. So thanks a lot. A reminder that we'll be back in 2 months to talk about careers in SciComm. So keep an eye out for information about that. Thanks, everybody.